All right, so this problem is a projectile launched horizontally. And it says in the problem, a bullet is fired from a rifle that's held 1.6 meters above the ground in a horizontal position. The initial speed of the bullet is 1,100 meters per second. Find the time it takes for the bullet to strike the ground. So I'm not very good at drawing rifles, so I'm not even going to try. But the bullet's going to leave the rifle horizontally, but then as soon as it leaves the rifle, it's going to start to fall because of gravity. So if I want to know the time that it takes for the bullet to strike the ground, most of the time I'm going to get these from my Y facts. So I'm going to assume that, especially since they told me how high the rifle was above the ground, I'm going to just write my Y facts right now. In fact, it makes it easy for me on the test if, like, there's a part A, a part B, and a part C. Like, don't write all your facts in part A. Write the facts that are relevant to solving that specific thing, all right? Because it makes it easier for me to correct when you do that. So for this, looking at this problem, if I want to know the time, I'm only going to write down my Y facts right now for part A. So I'm going to have that since the rifle is held 1.6 meters above the ground, then I know the bullet is going to fall 1.6 meters by the time it hits the ground. And I always know acceleration in the Y direction because we include the effect of gravity. So that's 9.8 meters per second squared. And if the projectile is launched horizontally, then to begin with, there is no vertical velocity. So the original velocity in the Y direction is 0 meters per second. So those are the three things that I know. And I can either use those facts to solve for the final velocity in the Y, like what's the vertical velocity when the bullet hits the ground, or how long is the bullet in the air. And the question is the time it takes for the bullet to strike the ground, so I am looking for time. So this would be my step 1. My step 2 is to pick the correct equation. The only fact I didn't write down was VFY. So my equation is going to be SY equals VOYT plus 1/2 AYT squared. That's the formula that I'm going to use. And this is usually the formula that we have to use, the quadratic formula, if nothing is zero. If nothing cancels out as 0, but VOY is 0. So if VOY is 0, then VOYT is 0. So I can cancel that right out. And now I'm left with an easier formula to work with. Now, if I want to solve for time, I want time. So first there's a fraction, so I'd multiply both sides by 2, and that's going to give me a 2SY up here. Then I'm going to divide by AY, and then I'm going to take the square root. So when I'm done doing all of that, again, I'm not going to waste time going through the minutiae of the algebra. It's going to be the square root of 2SY over AY. So again, the 1/2, when I multiply both sides by 2, would get me 2SY. Then I need to move the AY to the other side, so it's going to be divided by AY, and that would equal T squared, so T is the square root. So now in step 4, we're going to have T equals the square root. I know it's always plus or minus when you take the square root, but time has to be plus. So it's going to be 2SY over AY. So the SY is minus 1.6 meters, and the AY is minus 9.8 meters per second squared. So the minuses cancel out, and now let's say if you forgot to put the negative for SY, which, up here there's no negative, so you might forget it when you get here. Hopefully you would catch that mistake down here, because you wouldn't be able to take the square root of a negative number. So if we work that out, we get the answer for that was 0.571 seconds. So that would be the answer for part A. Now part B says the horizontal distance traveled by the bullet. That's an X fact. So I'll use a different color. And now for part B, I'm going to use, I'm going to write down the facts in the X direction. So I'm looking for S in the X direction. And one free fact that I always have is the acceleration, because since we ignore air resistance, acceleration is 0 meters per second squared. Now the VOX, we have that. It was given in the problem. If I go up top here, it was given as, I didn't use it in part A, but in part B, I need to know this. The initial speed of the bullet is 1,100 meters per second, and it was shot horizontally. So that's your original velocity in the x direction. So that's going to be VOX is 1,100 meters per second, and I'm going to use the time that I got from part A. So the time is 0.571 seconds. I see we're almost out of time. So the equation that I would be using, I'm going to try and rush through this. S equals VOXT plus 1/2 AXT squared. AX is 0, so my equation simplifies to this. And I don't have to even rearrange it. So just plugging in the numbers, I'm going to go right to step 4. SX equals VOXT. And putting those numbers in, you get the answer that I gave. So that was 1,100 meters per second, 0.571 seconds. And the answer came out to be 628 meters.